Caleb Morgan had lived on his Wyoming ranch for many years, yet every morning still felt the same. The sun always rose slowly over the wide, open land, painting the sky with soft gold and pale orange. The wind moved gently through the grass and whispered against the fences. The mountains stood in the distance, like old friends who never spoke but always watched over him. It was a peaceful life, but it also came with long hours of silence. Too much silence, he often thought. Caleb was a good man, steady, patient, and hard-working. He cared for his animals with the same attention someone else might give to family. He fixed every broken board, cleaned every tool, and brought in every bale of hay himself. There was no one else around to help, and he had grown used to that. But used to something did not mean happy with it. And lately, the quiet of the ranch had started to feel heavier than before. His brother, Daniel, had once lived with him, filling the home with laughter, ideas, and the sound of music from a small harmonica he kept in his coat pocket. Daniel had been the talkative one, the dreamer, always planning what they would build next on the ranch. But after his brother's passing the year before, the cabin had become still so still that Caleb sometimes woke in the night thinking he had heard footsteps, only to realize it was just the creak of the old floorboards. That loneliness was what led him to write to the mail-order bride agency in Street Louis. He had never imagined doing something like that. Caleb was not the type of man who looked for love through letters. He believed in meeting someone face to face, seeing their smile, shaking their hand, and speaking honestly. But miles and miles of land stood between him and the nearest town. The ranch kept him busy year-round. And, truth be told, he didn't know many women, except the few he had seen during his rare supply trips. They were always polite, but none had looked at him long enough for him to think they were interested, and he never stayed in town long enough for something more to grow. So one cold winter evening, when the light from the fireplace painted warm colors on the cabin walls, he finally decided to take a chance. He wrote a letter slowly, with careful handwriting to the agency. The woman he was matched with was named Evelyn Carter, a schoolteacher who lived far away from the open plains. Her letters were gentle and thoughtful. She wrote about her love for books, for children, and for a simple life. She said she wished to marry a man who was honest, kind, and steady, because she hoped for a peaceful home of her own. Each time Caleb received a letter from her, he felt something warm grow in his chest. He would sit at the wooden kitchen table, open the envelope with care, and read every word twice, sometimes 3 times. He liked the way she expressed her thoughts. He liked that she asked about his daily work, his horses, and the weather on the plains. She even asked what he hoped for his future. No one had asked him that in a long time. When spring finally came, Evelyn wrote that she was ready to travel west. Her last letter said she would arrive in early May. She was excited, she said. Nervous, but excited. Caleb folded that letter very gently and placed it in a wooden box he kept near his bed. From that moment, everything changed. He woke earlier each morning, wanting to prepare the ranch for her arrival. He scrubbed the kitchen until it smelled like fresh soap. He washed the windows until every ray of sunlight could come through clearly. He repaired the front steps, polished the saddle she would use if she ever wished to ride, and bought new curtains from town during his next supply run, light blue ones that reminded him of the sky after rain. He even built a small bookshelf for her, imagining she would bring at least a few of her favorite books. When he sanded the wood, he wondered what kind of stories she liked. Maybe she enjoyed tales about brave journeys. Maybe she preferred quiet stories about families. Maybe she liked poetry. He smiled at the thought. He hoped she would enjoy the surprise. At night, Caleb found himself rehearsing what he would say when she stepped off the stagecoach. He pictured her looking around, maybe holding her hat against the wind, and then turning her eyes toward him. What would he say? Welcome home? No. That felt too soon. I'm glad you're here? That was better, simple, honest, true. Sometimes he felt nervous. What if she didn't like the ranch? What if she found it too quiet? What if she felt the cabin was too small or the land too empty? He tried not to let these worries grow too large, reminding himself that she had chosen to come. She had read his letters and still said yes. That had to mean something. One warm afternoon, about a week before she was expected to arrive, Caleb saddled his horse and rode out to check the far fence line. The sky was wide and clear, almost the same color as the new curtains inside his cabin. While he rode, he thought about the life he hoped to build with Evelyn. Not a grand life, he never wanted anything grand. Just a shared one. Someone to talk to in the evenings. Someone to drink tea with in the mornings. Someone who might read a book aloud while he whittled wood by the fire. Someone who would turn the cabin from a lonely place into a true home again. He knew he wasn't perfect. His hands were rough, his voice was quiet, and sometimes he took too long to find the right words, but he was honest, calm, and loyal. He believed those were good things to offer someone. When he returned to the cabin that evening, he lit the lamp and looked around with a thoughtful smile. For the first time in a long while, he felt hopeful. Really hopeful. Every day after that passed slowly, each one filled with a gentle excitement. Caleb would look across the horizon whenever he heard distant hoofbeats or the roll of wagon wheels on the road. Maybe it was her. Maybe she would appear any moment. The thought filled him with a warmth he had nearly forgotten he could feel. As the expected date grew closer, he swept the porch twice, just in case. He brushed the dust from his best coat and set it aside for the day he would meet her. He even practiced smiling in the mirror, though it made him laugh at himself. The man in the reflection looked sincere, but slightly confused, as if he was trying to remember how smiling worked. But he kept practicing until it felt natural again. When the morning of her arrival finally came, the air was cool, but pleasant. Caleb woke before dawn, made fresh coffee, and sat at the table for a long moment, trying to steady the flutter he felt in his chest. Today, he would meet the woman he had written to for months. Today, his life might change. He stepped outside and let the sunlight fall across his face. The ranch looked calm and ready. The sky stretched endlessly above him. And somewhere down the long dirt road, a stagecoach would soon be coming. He didn't know yet that the person riding toward him was not Evelyn Carter. He didn't know that his carefully prepared plans would soon shift in ways he could never have imagined. All he knew was this. He was waiting. And he believed he was waiting for the start of a new life. Caleb stood on his porch with one hand resting on the railing, watching the empty road that wound across the plains. The sun was high enough now that he could feel its warmth on his shoulders, and a soft breeze carried the scent of sagebrush through the air. Today was supposed to be the day. Evelyn's stagecoach would arrive before noon, or so the last letter had said. He had imagined the moment so many times that it almost felt as if it had already happened. But as the sun climbed higher, the road stayed empty. Caleb tried not to worry too quickly. The stagecoach was often late. Sometimes the wheels sank into soft ground after a storm. Sometimes the horses needed extra rest. He knew this. He had seen it before. Still, a quiet concern hovered inside him, light but persistent. He pushed it aside and kept waiting. Around mid-morning, when the light grew brighter and the shadows shrank, Caleb noticed a speck far in the distance. It was small at first, just a dark dot moving toward him. His breath lifted slightly. Maybe it was the stagecoach. Maybe Evelyn was finally on her way. But as the figure drew closer, he realized it was not a coach at all. It was one single rider. He frowned with confusion. Riders almost never came up this road alone, not unless they were neighbors and he didn't have any neighbors within miles. The rider moved quickly, but unevenly, as if tired or carrying too much worry. Something about the sight made Caleb straighten his back. The horse came closer, kicking up little clouds of dust behind its hooves. The rider was a woman he could tell by the way her hair fell loose beneath her hat and the shape of her posture. She wasn't riding with elegance or calm. She leaned forward slightly, as if urging the horse gently, and her shoulders looked tense, as though she carried a weight she was trying hard not to drop. When she reached the edge of his yard, she slowed her horse, but didn't dismount right away. The woman lifted her head, and Caleb clearly saw her face for the first time. It was lined with exhaustion, framed by dust-touched strands of dark hair. Her eyes were alert, but also filled with a tired sadness that struck him deeply. She looked like someone who had gone too long without rest, without comfort, without a safe place to stop. Caleb took a cautious step forward, trying to appear welcoming without overwhelming her. "Ma'am," he said gently, "are you all right? Do you need help?" The woman hesitated for a moment before answering. She glanced back over her shoulder at the quiet road behind her, as if checking whether someone was following, though the plain stretched out in peaceful silence. Then she looked back at Caleb. "I'm sorry to ride in like this," she said, her voice soft but strained. I needed a place to rest. Just for a little while." Caleb nodded immediately. "Of course. You're welcome to stop here. You look worn out. Would you like some water? Maybe a chance to sit down? Kommenseder? Kommenseder. Kommenseder may. Kommenseder maybe." Caleb nodded. Caleb nodded immediately. Caleb nodded. Caleb nodded. Caleb nodded. Her shoulders loosened slightly, as though his kindness surprised her. "Water would be good," she admitted. "And thank you. I hope I'm not troubling you." "You're not troubling me at all," Caleb assured her. "Come on down, I'll help you." The woman dismounted slowly, carefully, as though her legs were stiff and sore from long hours of riding. Caleb could see she favored one ankle, not injured dangerously, but clearly strained from travel. He offered his arm, and she accepted it with a faint, grateful nod. Up close, she looked even more tired than he first thought. Dust clung to her clothes. Her hands trembled slightly. Her eyes were sharp but also full of a guarded look, as if she was used to keeping her distance from people. Caleb led her to the porch and handed her a cup of cool water he had drawn that morning. She drank slowly at first, then more eagerly, as though she hadn't tasted clean water in days. When she finished, she lowered the cup and took a steadying breath. "My name is Mara," she said quietly. "Mara Quinn." Caleb touched the brim of his hat. "I'm Caleb Morgan. Glad to meet you, Miss Quinn. You look like you've had a hard journey." "That's one way to say it," she murmured with a small, tired smile. "I've been traveling for weeks, longer than I planned, and I didn't expect to end up here." Caleb glanced at the road again. It was still empty. No stagecoach. No sound of wheels. Just the breeze, passing over the grass. "Were you headed somewhere in particular?" he asked gently. Mara hesitated, her fingers curling around the cup. "I was trying to get far from where I started," she said. "I needed a fresh place. A quiet place. Somewhere I could think. Somewhere no one would ask too many questions." There was nothing threatening in her words. Only a deep, quiet weariness. She seemed like someone who had endured too much confusion and needed peace more than anything else. Caleb nodded slowly. "Well, this land is quiet. You're safe to rest here as long as you need." Mara looked at him with a startled softness, as though she was not used to kindness given so freely. "Why would you help a stranger like me?" Caleb shrugged gently. "Everyone needs help sometimes. And you look like you could use some. Her eyes warmed at that a small, delicate change that made her look less like a traveler on the edge of collapse and more like a person trying to return to herself. Caleb motioned toward a chair on the porch. "Here, sit. I'll bring something for your horse too." Mara nodded gratefully and lowered herself into the chair, letting out a slow breath as she relaxed for the first time. Caleb could see how much relief washed over her. It made him glad he'd offered help. He unhitched her horse, guided it to the water trough, and brushed some dust from its coat. The horse was tired, but not dangerously so, just in need of gentler days. When Caleb returned to the porch, Mara was looking around the ranch quietly, her gaze thoughtful. "This place feels calm," she said softly. "I can't remember the last time I felt calm." Caleb took a seat across from her. "You're welcome to stay a while, Miss Quinn. At least until you catch your breath." She smiled faintly. "Mara is fine." "All right," he said with a nod. "Mara." Silence settled between them. But it wasn't uncomfortable. It was the kind of silence that felt like a blanket. Soft, warm, and safe. After a moment, Caleb asked, "Are you hungry? I can fix something simple. Bread, soup, maybe some fruit." Mara looked as though she wanted to refuse out of politeness, but her stomach answered first with a soft growl. She flushed with embarrassment. "I guess I am," she admitted shyly. Caleb smiled. "Then let me get you something." While he warmed the soup inside the cabin, he tried to make sense of the situation. A stranger showing up on the very day he expected his mail-order bride was surprising, to say the least. But he didn't feel uneasy around Mara. Something about her seemed honest, even in her guardedness. She looked like someone with a heavy story, but not a harmful one. Someone who had run from trouble, not caused it. When he brought her the meal, she ate slowly but gratefully. She thanked him more than once, each time with a sincerity that made him feel oddly protective of her. As she finished, she set the bowl aside and leaned back, closing her eyes briefly. "I didn't know how much I needed this," she whispered. "You can rest here," Caleb said gently. "No rush. No expectations." She opened her eyes and looked directly at him, studying his face as if trying to understand why a stranger would offer such kindness. Then she said quietly, "You're a good man, Caleb Morgan." He felt warmth rise in his chest at the words, and as the quiet afternoon settled around them, neither of them guessed how much their unexpected meeting would change their lives, nor that somewhere far off, the stagecoach carrying his expected bride had taken a different path, one that would never lead to his porch. The next morning arrived quietly, as most mornings on the open plains did. Caleb stepped outside, just as the first light touched the horizon. The air felt cool and fresh, carrying the smell of damp earth and morning dew. He took a slow breath, letting the peace settle inside him. But his mind drifted back to the woman resting in his guest room, Mara. He still couldn't quite understand how she had ended up at his ranch on the very day he had expected someone entirely different. But life on the frontier had taught him one thing: surprises came often and rarely asked permission. When he returned inside, he found Mara awake, sitting at the small kitchen table. She looked cleaner today. He had offered her the washroom the night before, along with a basin of warm water, and she had accepted gratefully. Her hair was brushed, her clothes looked less dusty, and her face, though still tired, seemed softer, calmer. "Good morning," she said, giving him a small smile. It was the first smile he'd seen from her that wasn't forced by politeness or exhaustion. "Morning," Caleb replied. "Hope you slept all right." "I slept better than I have in a long time," she said. "Thank you for letting me stay." "You're welcome here," he said gently. "You needed rest, and this ranch has plenty of quiet to share." She looked around the room as if taking in the details, for the first time, the wooden cabinets Caleb built himself, the fresh curtains he had hung, the neat shelves with jars of beans and flour. Her gaze paused on the small bookshelf he had made for Evelyn. The smooth wood gleamed softly in the morning light. "That shelf is new," Mara said. "You built it?" He nodded. "I did. Finished it a few weeks ago." "It's beautiful work," she said, touching the smooth surface lightly. Caleb cleared his throat. "It was supposed to be for someone who was coming." She looked up at him curiously. "For someone special?" He hesitated. He had not planned on explaining his situation to her so soon, but something in her expression, quiet, honest, trusting, made him feel he could speak openly. "I'm expecting a mail-order bride," he said simply. Mara's lips parted slightly. but she didn't say anything right away. She looked down at the table, absorbing his words with a thoughtful expression. Was she supposed to arrive yesterday? She finally asked. Yes, he said softly. But she never did. Mara nodded slowly. I see. He wondered for a moment if she would think poorly of him for seeking a bride this way. But her expression showed no judgment, only understanding. I'm sorry she didn't come, Mara said gently. That must have been disappointing. A little, Caleb admitted. But I'm sure there's a reasonable explanation. Travel delays happen often out here. He said it with an easy tone, but inside, he wasn't as sure. Still, he didn't want to burden Mara with his worries. She had her own story, one she hadn't shared yet. After breakfast, Caleb stepped outside to tend to the animals. When he returned, he found Mara at the porch railing, looking out at the wide plains. The wind played gently with her hair as she stared into the distance with a faraway expression. You all right? Caleb asked, joining her. She nodded. Yes, just thinking. About what? He asked softly. A long moment passed. Then she lowered her gaze, her eyes thoughtful and a little pained. My story isn't simple, Caleb, she said. I've been running from a lot of confusion and trouble. Nothing dangerous, just a very complicated situation in the town I came from. People misunderstood me, and I didn't know how to fix it. Caleb listened quietly, giving her space to speak. She seemed relieved that he didn't interrupt. I left because I needed time to think, she continued. I needed a place where I could breathe for a while. I wasn't sure where I would go. I only rode in the direction that felt like it led away from everything. Caleb nodded slowly. Sometimes going far is the only way to find clarity. She looked at him, her eyes softening with gratitude. You're very understanding. We have it getted. I try to be, he said with a small smile. I know what it's like to feel lost. After my brother passed, I felt like the world had become too big for one person. Her expression gentled even more at his honesty. She leaned against the railing slightly, as if his calmness helped her relax. You know, she said, when I first saw your ranch, I almost kept riding. I didn't want to trouble anyone. But something about this place, something about the quiet, and maybe something about you, made me stop. Caleb felt a warmth spread through his chest. I'm glad you did. She smiled a real, warm smile that made her eyes brighten. For the rest of the morning, they worked side by side in easy companionship. Mara offered to help with chores, insisting she didn't want to feel like a burden. Caleb tried to tell her she needed rest, but she was determined, and he admired her spirit. Together they gathered eggs from the chicken coop, fed the animals, and checked the garden. Mara moved slowly at first, still tired from her long journey, but she seemed content to work with her hands. Every now and then, she paused to breathe in the fresh air or look across the plains, as if she was letting nature heal parts of her heart she hadn't realized were hurting. Caleb watched her from time to time, not staring, just observing quietly. She looked different from the day before. Less afraid. More like someone rediscovering her strength. Later, when the sun grew warm, they rested beneath the shade of a large cottonwood near the barn. Caleb handed her a cool drink, and for a while, they simply enjoyed the stillness. I don't know how long I'll stay, Mara said softly, breaking the silence. I don't want to intrude on your life. You're not intruding, Caleb said. You're a guest, and you're welcome. But you were expecting someone else, she reminded him gently. He paused, then spoke truthfully. Yes, but right now, you're the one here, and you needed help. That matters more. Mara looked touched by his words. She lowered her gaze, quietly moved. You're very kind, she whispered. Caleb felt a warmth rise in his chest again. Something about Mara's presence settled the quiet around him in a different way. It wasn't the silence of loneliness anymore, it was the silence of two people who didn't need to fill every moment with words. As the afternoon stretched on, they talked more soft, honest conversations about small things. She told him she loved reading stories but rarely had the chance. He told her he carved wooden animals when winter nights got long. She shared that she used to watch sunsets from the roof of her home. And he told her how he liked to watch storms roll across the plains like slow, gray blankets. Neither of them spoke about the future. Neither of them mentioned when she might leave, or what would happen when Evelyn arrived, if she ever did. It was as if both quietly agreed that the present moment was gentle enough to hold on to. As the sun began to sink, painting the sky pink and gold, Mara stood beside Caleb on the porch again. "This place feels peaceful," she said softly. "Maybe too peaceful." Caleb chuckled lightly. "There are worse things to get attached to." She looked at him, her expression tender and thoughtful, as if she was studying him in a new way. "Thank you for being someone I can trust," she whispered. He met her gaze. Always. And in that quiet, glowing evening, a bond began to form, something soft and true. Something neither of them had planned. Neither spoke it aloud, but both felt it. They were no longer strangers. They were two people, both carrying unspoken stories, slowly learning they didn't have to carry them alone. The next few days passed quietly on the ranch, almost peacefully. Yet there was always a little cloud of worry floating inside Mara's thoughts. Caleb noticed it sometimes, in the way she paused before answering his questions, or the way her eyes drifted toward the open road, as if expecting something unwelcome to appear. She never looked frightened, just thoughtful, as though she was carefully waiting for something she hoped would never happen. Caleb didn't push her to talk. He had learned long ago that people shared their stories only when they felt safe, not when someone tried to pull the words out. So instead, he stayed close, offered gentle company, and made sure she knew she didn't have to face anything alone while she was under his roof. One morning, while Caleb repaired a fence near the south field, he saw Mara walking slowly across the yard with a bucket of fresh water. Her hair moved freely in the breeze, and the sunlight warmed her tired face. She looked calmer every day, but something still lingered behind her eyes, something unresolved. He set down his tools and walked toward her. "You're up early," he said, smiling lightly. "I couldn't sleep," she admitted. "My mind kept thinking too much." "Anything you want to talk about?" She hesitated, her fingers curling around the bucket handle. Caleb nodded. "Take all the time you need." She looked grateful for his patience. The two spent the first half of the day working together, watering the garden, checking the chickens, brushing the horses. They spoke about simple things, like the weather, the nearby hills, the way clouds gathered in the afternoons. Caleb kept it easy, hoping to help her stay calm. And even though Mara tried to hide it, it was clear she appreciated the normal routine. It helped her feel grounded. Around noon, Caleb went inside to prepare lunch. He was stirring a pot of warm vegetable stew when he heard the distinct rhythm of multiple horses' hooves approaching from the distance. The sound wasn't loud yet, but it was steady, clear, and unusual. Not many travelers came down this road, and certainly not groups. Caleb stepped out onto the porch, shading his eyes with his hand as he looked toward the long dirt road. A group of 3 riders was approaching. All 3 wore neat coats and carried small leather folders tied to their saddles. Their posture was straight and purposeful. Not threatening, but official. They looked like men who had come for a reason, not just passing by. Mara was near the barn stacking some tools when she noticed the riders. Her posture stiffened. She froze in place, her hands gripping the handle of a rake as if it were the only steady thing around her. Caleb immediately walked toward her, keeping his voice calm. "It's all right," he said softly. "They look like officials, maybe from town. Nothing to worry about." Mara swallowed and nodded, but her shoulders stayed tense. The riders reached the yard and slowed their horses. The man in front, who wore a badge pinned to his vest, offered a polite nod. "Good afternoon," he said with a practiced, courteous voice. "Are you Caleb Morgan?" "I am," Caleb replied. "We're from the county office. We're looking into a matter involving a woman who traveled through nearby towns a few weeks ago. There were some misunderstandings, and we're trying to make sure everything is settled properly." His tone was calm, respectful. Still, Mara stepped a little behind Caleb, instinctively seeking the comfort of his presence. He felt her breathe in sharply. Caleb nodded. "What kind of misunderstandings?" The man opened his folder and read from it. A woman named Mara Quinn was involved in an argument in her hometown. There were concerns about her well-being. It seems she left in a hurry, and her family and neighbors were worried. Caleb glanced at Mara gently. She looked surprised, not frightened, just caught off guard. Her eyes softened with a mix of relief and confusion. It wasn't danger following her. It was concern. The official continued. "We'd like to speak with her, but only if she wishes. We only want to make sure she is safe and not facing any trouble." Mara stepped forward slowly. Caleb looked at her with reassuring eyes, silently telling her she didn't have to face anything alone. She took a small breath. "I am Mara Quinn." The official gave her a gentle smile. "We're glad to find you. People back home have been worried. They said you left without saying much. They weren't sure if something had upset you. We just want to help." Mara's lips trembled slightly. Not from fear, but from the sudden shift of emotions. For so long, she believed she had been running from trouble. Yet the men standing before her were calm, patient, and kind. They didn't accuse her of anything. They didn't seem upset. They only seemed concerned. "I didn't know they were that worried," she said quietly. Caleb watched her closely, ready to step in if she needed support. The official nodded understandingly. "Sometimes people care more than we realize. If you need guidance or help settling somewhere new, we can arrange that. But first, we want to hear your side of the story." One. Mara looked at Caleb again. His steady presence gave her courage. "I'll talk to you," she said softly. "But I want Mr. Morgan nearby. I feel safe with him." The official nodded. "Of course." The group sat around Caleb's porch table while Mara explained her story. She spoke slowly, choosing each word with care. She told them about the confusion in her hometown, how her neighbors misunderstood her sudden decision to leave, how rumors grew, how she felt overwhelmed and afraid of being judged unfairly. She had not hurt anyone. She had not committed any wrongdoing. She simply felt trapped by the misunderstandings and emotions surrounding her. The officials listened patiently, taking notes, but always maintaining gentle expressions. Caleb remained quietly beside her, giving her support through his calm presence. When she finished, one of the men closed his folder with a reassuring smile. "Miss Quinn," he said, "thank you for explaining. Everything you described makes sense. There were no charges, no formal complaints, nothing legal, only worry. It seems this was all the result of miscommunication." Mara blinked, surprised by how simple the truth was. She had imagined far worse. "So I'm not in trouble?" she asked. "Not at all," the man said kindly. "If anything, people were concerned for you. They wanted to be sure you were well." Mara let out a long, shaky breath she didn't know she had been holding. Caleb's heart softened at the sight. She had carried a burden much heavier in her mind than in reality. The officials offered her the chance to return home with them. But Mara looked at Caleb, then at the peaceful ranch, then at the wide, healing land around her. "I don't want to go back yet," she said quietly. "I'm doing better here. I'm finally breathing again." The officials nodded respectfully. "You're free to choose. If this place brings you peace, then you should stay as long as you need." Caleb felt a wave of warmth inside him. Not because she chose to stay, but because she chose it freely. The officials thanked them both and rode away calmly, leaving behind a cloud of dust and a sense of relief that seemed to settle over the entire ranch. When the yard was quiet again, Mara turned toward Caleb. Her face softened, her eyes shimmering with gratitude. "I thought trouble was chasing me," she whispered. "But it was only worry. Only people who cared, even if they didn't understand me." Caleb nodded gently. "Sometimes our fears make shadows bigger than they are." She stepped closer to him, her voice almost trembling. "Thank you for standing by me. For believing in me, even when I didn't believe in myself." "You don't have to face things alone," Caleb said softly. "Not here." Mara exhaled, feeling lighter than she had in months. She looked around the ranch, the open fields, the warm cabin, the quiet sky, and felt something new blooming inside her. For the first time in a long time, she wasn't running. She was simply living. The days after the officials left passed with a new kind of calm, one that felt lighter than before. The tension that had once clung quietly to Mara's shoulders seemed to fade with each sunrise. She moved around the ranch with a softer expression, no longer glancing nervously at the road or pausing every time she heard the distant rustle of wind. Instead, she looked more at ease in herself, as if a heavy chapter of her life had finally closed. Caleb noticed the change gently. He didn't mention it out loud, but he felt it every time she smiled a little more easily, or laughed at something simple, he said. Her laughter was soft and warm, like a small lantern glowing inside a quiet house. He realized how much he had missed hearing laughter around his home. One morning, as they sat outside drinking warm tea, Mara watched the sunlight spread across the grass in golden layers. The peacefulness of the ranch wrapped around them like a soft blanket. "You know," she said quietly, "I didn't plan on staying this long." "I know," Caleb replied with a small smile. "It just feels safe here," she admitted. "Feels honest." Caleb nodded. "The land has that way about it. It gives people space to breathe." She looked at him thoughtfully. "It's not just the land, Caleb." He didn't ask what she meant. He didn't need to. Her tone carried enough meaning, and it rested warmly in his heart. Still, as peaceful as everything felt, Caleb couldn't ignore one lingering question: the mail-order bride he had been expecting. He had not received any new letters, nor had the stagecoach brought any word about her. At first, he pushed the thought aside. But as days turned into more days, he began to wonder what had really happened. Finally, one quiet afternoon, a rider from town arrived. He carried a small envelope with Caleb's name written on the front. The rider handed it over politely before heading back down the road. Caleb turned the letter in his hands, slowly. It was from the agency in Street Louis. Mara, who had been shelling peas on the porch, paused what she was doing. "Is that news?" "I think so," Caleb said softly. He opened the envelope carefully and read the short letter inside. It explained that Evelyn Carter, the woman he had been corresponding with, had written to the agency recently. She apologized for not traveling. She had received an unexpected proposal from a man in her own town and had accepted. She didn't want to disappoint Caleb, but she had felt it was the right decision for her life. The agency expressed their apologies for the confusion. Caleb folded the letter gently and let out a slow breath. Mara watched him with quiet concern. "Bad news?" He shook his head. "Not bad, just different than expected." She hesitated. "Are you disappointed?" Caleb thought for a moment before answering honestly. "I was at first, but now I think it's better this way. We wrote nice letters to each other, but we didn't truly know one another. She found a life that felt right for her. I'm glad she did." Mara nodded softly, understanding without pressing further. Caleb leaned against the porch post, looking out at the wide evening sky. He felt a strange calm settle over him, not the calm of giving up, but the calm of realizing that life had gently shifted into something he hadn't planned, but quietly welcomed. Later that night, after dinner, Mara stepped outside to breathe in the cool air. The stars were bright, scattered across the sky like tiny sparks. Caleb joined her, standing beside her with a comfortable silence between them. She spoke first, her voice gentle. "I'm glad you're not hurt by the letter." "I'm all right," he said. "Life doesn't always come the way we expect. Sometimes it comes in ways we never imagined." She glanced at him, her eyes shimmering with something unspoken. "You've been very patient with me. Very kind. I don't know how to thank you." "You don't owe me thanks," Caleb said softly. "You just needed a place to rest. And I'm glad I could give you that." Mara hugged her arms lightly around herself, not from cold, but from the weight of emotions that she wasn't sure how to express. "You gave me more than rest," she whispered. "You gave me peace when I didn't think I could feel peaceful again." Caleb turned to face her. In the soft starlight, her eyes looked gentle and full of sincerity. The sight touched him deeply. "Mara," he said quietly, "you don't have to decide anything tonight, or tomorrow, or any time soon, but I want you to know, you're welcome here, for as long as you wish." Her breath caught slightly. "Do you really mean that?" "I do," he said, steady as always. "Whether it's for a day, a week, or forever, you choose the time. You choose the life you want." She blinked, moved by his words. Forever is a big word. "It is," Caleb agreed softly. "But so is trust. And you've trusted me more than you know." For a long moment, they stood quietly together under the sky. The world around them seemed to hold its breath, waiting for something gentle to settle. Finally, Mara stepped a little closer to him. Not much, just enough that Caleb felt the warmth of her presence. "I don't know what my future looks like," she said honestly. "But when I imagine trying to build a new life, this place feels like the first place that makes sense." Caleb's heart warmed slowly, deeply. "Then, let this be where you start. No pressure. No expectations. Just a beginning." A soft smile touched her lips. "A beginning sounds nice." They stood together as the breeze rustled the grass. It wasn't a grand moment or a dramatic confession. It was gentle, the kind of moment that grows roots quietly, becoming something strong over time. Over the next few days, Mara became even more at home. She helped Caleb organize the barn, arranged fresh flowers in jars on the kitchen table, and added little touches around the cabin that made it feel warmer. Caleb noticed how naturally she fit into the rhythm of the ranch. She didn't try to change things, yet everything felt a little brighter with her there. One evening, Caleb found her sitting by the small bookshelf he had made, the one he thought would remain empty forever. She was running her fingers gently along the smooth wood. "This shelf deserves to be used," she said with a shy smile. "Maybe I could buy a few books from town. Nothing fancy. Just stories to fill the quiet evenings." Caleb smiled back. "I'd like that." And he truly meant it. As the sun dipped behind the hills, painting the sky with deep orange and gold, Mara stepped beside him again. They watched the colors together, the silence between them warm and full. Life hadn't gone the way Caleb had planned. He hadn't met the woman he once expected. But instead, life had quietly brought him someone who understood him in ways he hadn't realized he needed. Someone who healed in his presence, and someone who helped him heal too. Mara didn't know exactly what the future would hold, but she knew one thing with certainty. She didn't feel lost anymore. She didn't feel like she was running. She didn't feel alone. She felt like she'd found a place where she could stay. And maybe, just maybe, a person she could build a life with. Caleb felt it too. Not rushed, not forced, just two hearts gently choosing the same path, one peaceful day at a time.